Welcome to the Mainline Podcast. I'm Adam Jacquez. Finally have a full crew on the podcast, Corbin and Tyler and myself all together, all at the same time. Feels like it's been a little bit rare over this past month, but I think we'll be a little bit more consistent here, especially as we lead up to football season and things start calming down. But good to have everyone back here. Corbin, I think you should kick us off here. Got anything exciting going on in your life right now?
It is a great day to be a hockey fan in the state of Colorado. That's all I got to say. Boys won the cup in Game 6 down in Tampa. Guys, truly remarkable run. And just as I know you guys aren't big hockey fans, just as sports fans, they won 10 games on the road out of their 16 wins, and they clinched every series on the road to win the Stanley Cup. So between DU winning the college hockey national championship and obviously the Avs now winning the Stanley Cup, we are hockey town in this country, which is great.
Corbin, obviously, I went to that bachelor party in Denver. I guess it was during the Western Conference Finals, and going to McGregor Square, going to, I think it was Tom's Watch Bar.
Oh yeah, great spot.
The scene, like, you think that like what passionate fan bases are, and we'll touch on that here as we get a little bit later into the podcast with OU's fan base. But no, I think the playoff hockey just kind of hits different. I mean, just being there for that one game, I'm a Dallas Stars fan, but being there for that, knowing that you're a huge Avs fan, we followed it the whole rest of the playoffs. So how low-key you were hoping that was going 7, though, right? Because you would have had tickets for it.
Honestly, it was kind of a win-win. I mean, I coughed up a good chunk of change for those 2 Game 7 tickets, so I get that back.
Nice.
And with all the, as you guys know, the house stuff we got going on, all the moving, could use that money back. A little extra change in the pocket. So, but yeah, I mean, it would have been great, but I would have been nervous out of my mind, guys. And I wouldn't be here right now because Game 7 would have been tonight. So, so you guys can send thank you notes to the Avs. I was able to make it this week.
Are you going to the parade? Yeah, there it is.
I am going to go to the parade, yeah. I am going to go to the parade. I mean, I started skating when I was 3 years old, and I've never seen the Stanley Cup in person. So, you never know if it's going to be back in Denver. So, I'm not a big parade guy, but, I want to go see the Cup. I think it'll be really cool.
When is that? This
Thursday.
Friday? Thursday?
Yep,
okay.
Thursday. Yep. I'm just going to take off. Yeah.
Call in sick. There you go.
Yeah, it's also me and my fiance's 1 year. So, it's all matching up. So,
are y'all doing anything for the 4th?
We have plans, I think, every night, Friday through Monday night. We're just going to hit as many shows as possible. But out here, everything's so dry, there's a lot of cancellations in the fireworks shows, so kind of sad.
Yeah. Adam?
Well, I hope to see pictures of you, climbed up a light pole or something on the streets of Denver. I know there will be some crazy stuff because they love the Avs up there. So, unfortunately, the awkward transition from one team that won a championship to a team that was not able to pull it off, OU baseball. I can't say enough about how, grateful I am for what this team was able to accomplish over the last 2.5 months, the way they ended this season. And yeah, it was disappointing to not be able to take out Ole Miss, but at the same time, I'll ask you guys, this feels like the most surprising result for just an overall season in OU sports since that 2000 national championship team. Who saw this one coming?
I think I would even take it a step further. I would kind of compare this to Buddy Hield's senior season at Oklahoma, the Final Four run. I mean, didn't we expectation? Well, I don't think that you really ever expect Oklahoma to make a Final Four in men's basketball. I mean, if we're being realistic, but as good as that team was, playing, going up against Kansas, twice, really battling it out, almost winning the Big 12 conference, going all the way to the Final Four. There was so much momentum for that basketball team, just like there was for baseball. And then just like we ran into a buzzsaw in Villanova, we just kind of ran into a perfect storm with, fantastic pitching from Ole Miss. And, it was we talked about it last week, Adam, because this team was, picked to finish preseason number 6 just in the conference alone. If Oklahoma doesn't win a national championship, can you be disappointed? Even though we've gotten this far into the season, and I mean, honestly, it kind of was a little disappointing, especially once you saw, the performances from Jake Bennett and Cade Horton, who hopefully that's not the last time we see him in a Sooners uniform. But yeah, it was kind of a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, so let's dig in a little bit there. I think some people are down on what Jake Bennett did on the first game on Saturday night. He did have 10 strikeouts through 6 innings.
Oh, I'm not. I hope that's not how that came across.
Okay,
no,
well, yeah, I know some people are. I mean, he had some wild pitches that maybe the catcher should have been able to stop and didn't. But I thought he put you in a great spot. I don't think that, the team just came prepared to play that night. You had errors in the field. The shift was kind of strange. I never really like running the shift, to be honest. It seems like they always are able to hit it the other way. And then Cade Horton on Sunday gave you, the game of his life. I think he set the record for strikeouts in a College World Series final game with 13. So, you had everything defensively, and you set up perfectly on Sunday for Trevin Michael to come in and close it out. And I wouldn't change a thing if I had done it again. If I was in Skip Johnson's shoes, like that was the formula, was get 100 pitches from Cade, move to your closer and Trevin Michael, who has been absolutely amazing throughout the entire postseason. And then out of nowhere, he just gives up, multiple runs, which who could have predicted that? You really didn't have a choice. Yeah, you had no choice. I mean, Cade Horton's a guy that he kind of 100's about his limit there. So it was frustrating. Ole Miss was a team that I think it was about 2 weeks ago before the World Series even started that Corbin and I talked about as a team on the other side of the bracket that you really didn't want to see in that championship series. And lo and behold, there they are. And not only do they absolutely, thwart our hot hitting, but they do it without their best pitcher. He didn't even pitch at all. He was probably in line to start on the Monday evening game. So it's tough, but at the same time, you look at it and you go, hey, this is something that no Big 12 team has even played in the final series since 2009 when Texas did it. So over a decade, and OU was the first one to do it. It wasn't Oklahoma State. It wasn't TCU or any of the other programs that have had, a lot of success in this tournament. It was OU that did that. And so you just have to look at that and go, okay, I think OU baseball is back to being what we think it can be and what it was up until probably about a decade ago. So a lot of optimism, a lot to be excited about, even though you do lose some key pieces going forward.
Adam, I think that was one thing I was curious to get your opinion on. Is this we look back in a few years and be like, man, it's been a while since we've made a postseason run, or do you think this really kind of changes the tide of where this program's headed?
We always talk about that COVID year and what could have been. And I don't think that you could necessarily, and mainly we were talking about that in regards to Skip Johnson's, coaching security. Now that you have a run to the final series in Omaha, I think now you can validate that 2020 year and say, yes, that was, maybe they weren't an Omaha team. Maybe they lose in super regionals, but they were the quality of team. And now you can validate that by saying, okay, 2 out of the last 3 years, we know we've had really good teams. So I do think going forward, I think this will, getting to Omaha is tough. I don't know that OU will necessarily be back next year or the year after that or 4 years from now. But can it be a team that competes to get to super regionals, and maybe host a super regionals, be one of the elite, 16 teams out there? That would be huge. So I definitely think this is a turn in the right direction for OU baseball, for sure.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead, Tyler.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
One thing probably a little bit more disappointing than the actual on-field performance in the championship series was in the stands. And let's be honest, guys, like we see it time and time again where any sport excluding football and probably softball to an extent, just because the championship's in Oklahoma City, OU fans just don't seem to travel very well. And maybe I can't say anything. I didn't go. I don't think either one of you guys went. So it was one of those things where like maybe we aren't the ones to talk, but guys, Ole Miss brought the whole stadium. And so I just wonder how, as a closer state, as you would think a more prideful fan base, I mean, we were kind of embarrassed in the stands in that championship series, were we not?
Yeah, I talked to a guy that actually made the trip up there, and he said I believe it was the second game on Sunday, which I can't say anything. I didn't watch it. I was on the golf course when it was happening, so we'll forget that point. But he said it was flat out. It was 85-15 or maybe even 90-10 Ole Miss fans. That was the majority of the crowd on Sunday, which, in collegiate athletics, I think that's probably, in terms of a home field advantage where the crowd can actually have, an impact on a game. I think that college athletics is one where the fans really do have that more so than in like the NFL or the NBA. But I think, guys, we've talked about this, not just in baseball, not just in basketball, but I even think sometimes in the sport of football here at Oklahoma, our fan base is very reactionary driven. You don't always have the full 110%, going crazy cheering, from the time that the ball's kicked off all the way to the, final whistle. just like in everything, I think that we ran into not just a buzzsaw in the team that we played in Ole Miss, but also we kind of got a welcome to the SEC type of experience on Saturday and Sunday against Ole Miss. And when talking about the fan bases and the passion, football, we all know that the SEC is king when it comes to passion, but baseball is not far behind it when you look at some of the teams. And Adam, you even sent us the information about the attendance from teams like Arkansas, Texas A&M, Alabama, Tennessee. It is a different ball game once you in collegiate athletics in that part of the country. And I think that OU, we're going to have to make some changes, not just as a program with the way that we recruit, with the way that our facilities are. Now it kind of looks like we're kind of going in the right direction, Adam, with our facilities upgrade coming to baseball here pretty soon. But we also have to change the way in which we travel, because once you're in the SEC, home teams, games that are going to be played at L. Dale Mitchell Park. Once you're playing in the SEC, I guarantee you'll see 4, 5, 6,000 Arkansas fans, 4, 5, 6,000 Texas A&M fans. So Oklahoma is really going to have to adapt and be able to travel and support this team on the road.
It's interesting because with Ole Miss, you can't make the excuse that the other fan base is richer. Definitely not true coming from Mississippi. No offense to anyone from there, but it's a different economy there. It's not a larger fan base, that's for sure. The state of Oklahoma itself has 1 million more people than the state of Mississippi. So OU fans were closer. They had more resources to get there. They had a larger fan base. I think part of the problem is that the fan base itself really didn't know that baseball season is happening in a lot of cases. And I'm kind of made that sarcastic joke a lot when I was working, as the manager of ticket sales for baseball, as far as, hey, most OU fans don't even know that we're playing because they're so focused on basketball if they're in the tournament, or football off season. And now softball. Yeah. Softball's picked up in the last 2 or 3 years, like a ton more, even though they were winning championships before that. But just the OU fans, they almost kind of pride themselves on, I don't watch baseball. I only watch softball because it's easier. And I'm like, you don't have to watch every game. In fact, you could probably watch like 0 games in the postseason, but at least follow the tweets, see what's going on, check in, read a game recap once in a while, know who's good, know if you won a series or how things are trending. You don't have to watch the entire game. That's a lot of time to put into that, but at least know what's going on so that you can be engaged and be prepared to, hey, this team could make a run to Omaha. And, I have some investment in that. And the fan base is just not there. I guess the question I have too is, like, besides winning, like, what changes this culture? Because most of these teams are winning at super high levels, and you can't say that winning was the problem this year for baseball. Like, so what changes this fan culture?
The only thing I can put on it is simply being challenged by another fan base. I do think this fan base responds well when challenged, and so I'm curious, when they start experiencing the type of environments that away fans will bring to Norman when we enter the SEC, type of environments that we'll see when we're on the road. I wonder if that can invigorate something, but outside of that, there's nothing you can say and there's nothing you can do to change what this is, because it's been like this for a long time. And I know it kind of sucks for baseball because it's always going to be viewed in the same lens as softball, just because of the timing and obviously the type of sport. But guys, if the Women's College World Series wasn't in Oklahoma City, this would be the exact same for softball too. I don't see it being any different. If the softball World Series was in Omaha, I'm not saying OU fans would be outnumbered as bad, but they wouldn't fill the stadium like we're used to seeing. That's just a given. So I really think it's like football is the only thing that kind of gets this fan base to travel. But we know this is trying to say this appropriately, this is a non-intimidating fan base at the end of the day, and that's just kind of the truth of it.
It's almost like we're too successful and we rely on tradition and best program since the modern era and those types of things, and throw those types of stats and facts out on Twitter where we're safe, but we don't want to go out. It doesn't. I mean, it plays to us as OU fans, but not to anybody else really. But yeah, it's almost like we're a victim of our own success, because like Ole Miss, that was, I think, their first team championship. Maybe they won something, minor like equestrian or swimming, a couple of years ago, but that was their first major team championship. Like, they don't have anything to hang their hat on, and they're showing up in force.
Corbin, I think you hit the nail on the head when talking about, what can be the difference, what can spark that change. And, I'm going to make another example of football. Oklahoma football, what's been the biggest thing that's forced us to kind of change and adapt? It's the fact that, we can play well all season, but once you come up against an Ohio State, a Clemson, an Alabama, or a Georgia, and you get your ass kicked, you being challenged like that, it kind of forces you to have to adapt and change the way that you play the game. And this is very, very similar, I think, in terms of a fan base, in terms of supporting your team. We got a pretty good taste of what that's going to look like in the Southeastern Conference here, starting in the next couple of years with what Ole Miss did to us from a fan attendance standpoint. So, guys, distance to Omaha from Norman, Oklahoma, 472 miles, from Oxford, Mississippi, 719. So you can't blame it on the distance. You can't blame it on, travel funds or anything like that. Oklahoma had almost half the distance to get to that College World Series than Ole Miss did, and quite frankly, our fans just didn't show up. And that's not, I can't say anything. We weren't there. I wasn't there. So, I mean, I'm just as guilty as the next person, but, Oklahoma's going to have to adapt, and they're going to have to make some changes, especially with football.
One thing I'll say here to kind of wrap up baseball, and I think it'll be a good transition into our next topic. There's just so many fans that show up in the last 2 weeks. Like, I'm grateful to have those fans to be a part of it, but and just OU fans in general, even the ones that are locked in from day one. But I know a lot of people are wanting to spend other people's money. They want the new facilities to be paid for by someone richer than them. No one actually wants to really make much of a contribution there. But you also look at just the coaches' salaries too. Skip Johnson coming in the year, $215,000 is his annual salary. The least, or I guess the lowest salary that a SEC coach makes is Missouri's Steve Bieser, I believe is how you pronounce his name, $470,000. That goes all the way up to Vanderbilt's coach, who makes 1.6. So there's a lot of money in SEC baseball, and OU's going to have to catch up there. And it's going to be one thing, to get SEC money, but it's going to be another thing on the fan base to actually show up and support this team and buy tickets and go to games and so forth. It's not just someone richer than me that needs to spend their money, and not me. So
Adam,
I think that does tie into a lot to the recruiting. But yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
I did have a question for you, or maybe it's more just kind of get your thoughts on it. One of the biggest things that kind of stuck out for me when looking at the way that Oklahoma played against Ole Miss over the weekend, we saw this team, towards the end of March, the entire month of April, winning the 5 straight series to close out the Big 12 regular season, winning the conference tournament, going on the road, winning in Gainesville, going on the road, winning in Blacksburg, Virginia, and then starting out 3-0 in the College World Series. The lineup has been just on fire. The bats 1 through 9, everybody from starting with Kendall Pettis in the 9-hole, getting everything going, with Spikerman leading off. I think that the biggest thing that kind of stuck out for me, you got great performances. I don't care what anybody says. Jake Bennett threw a hell of a game. He did a good enough job in game 1 for Oklahoma to win that game on Saturday. And then Cade Horton, who's just been dominant over the last 4 to 5 weeks. But the big thing, the eye-popping thing when looking at our performance in those 2 games, a combined 8 total hits in 18 innings of play against the Rebels. So just Adam, do you think that was the moment too big for Oklahoma? Did Oklahoma, by going 3-0, getting the extra amount of rest, was there a rust factor, or do you just think it was kind of a team of destiny with Ole Miss, and OU just kind of ran into a buzzsaw?
I think Ole Miss is a buzzsaw. I mean, they had incredible pitching, and people kind of looked at them as a Cinderella, being the last team in the tournament. Like, no, come on, this team was ranked number
7-14 in conference play.
Yeah, but they were ranked number 1 at one point in the season. They were number 5 coming in preseason. Like, this team had loads of talent, and they just didn't get their act together until here in the postseason. So, yeah, OU's hitters could have been better. I think strategically, you would have liked to have seen them change up some of their strategy at the plate as far as what they were going to swing at, when they were going to swing at, and so forth. Treadaway and Peyton Graham basically went cold at the plate. Blake Robertson's been cold the entire postseason. He was your leading hitter throughout most of the regular season and was just basically non-existent. And it didn't matter for most of the games. OU was able to get around that, but it comes back to bite you when you have your 2, 3, 4 hitters in a row there doing absolutely nothing, on top of Wallace Clark and Kendall Pettis, who were phenomenal at the plate at Virginia Tech and at Florida, but then they get to Omaha, and I think between the two of them, they combine for maybe 2 hits across multiple games.
Yeah.
So, that's just a big piece of your lineup. Brett Squires gets his hand broken in game 1 in Omaha. So it ran out of gas, and your top guys that you normally could count on really weren't able to produce anything.
We'll leave Cade Horton out of this question because we'll talk about him here towards the end of the podcast. But outside of losing Tanner Treadway, the redshirt senior, going into next season, you've got a large chunk of this current team coming back for another season. Is Oklahoma in danger of maybe losing anybody else? Maybe whether it's MLB draft going early, like Cade Horton, Peyton Graham. Does he kind of dip his toe to possibly going into the MLB? Or do you think that this is an opportunity for Skip to return 95% of the production from this team going into next season?
I think Peyton Graham's a lock. Jake Bennett's gone. David Sandlin has indicated he's returning. As far as we know at this point, I don't think he's going to be, super high draft pick to warrant leaving. So
you think Graham and Bennett are gone?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, without a doubt in my mind, I think they're both gone. So you do have, some good freshmen coming back. You got Jackson Nicholas. I think he moves up in the lineup. He showed a lot of home run power throughout the, his time starting. He even started a full year. I think you like Wallace Clark. If he can develop a little bit more consistency at the plate. Spikerman's there. Pettis is there. You've got some good guys. You got Kyle Nevin transferred in from Baylor, hit over 300. So there's some pieces. And there's some good recruits coming in. We'll see what they can piece together. I think this is going to be a destination for portal guys as well. So a long way to go. And I think it's going to be a drawn out process, with the draft and how that works. It's a lot different than football or basketball where guys can come back even after getting drafted once they see the numbers. So we shall see. But future overall, pretty bright, regardless of how good or bad this team is next year, in my opinion.
Well, let's transition. Let's talk a little bit of football. I feel like it's been a month since we've actually had a football topic on this podcast, so it's kind of nice, having baseball go on this long run. It shortens the off season for OU fans. But guys, I want to touch on recruiting here a little bit, and obviously I wasn't able to partake in this conversation with you guys a couple of weeks ago. But Oklahoma did land another 3-star offensive lineman. 3-star U is a hashtag that's kind of becoming famous on the message boards. And that is 2023 offensive lineman Heath Ozida. That's what I'm gonna go with. 6'6", 296-pound offensive tackle. Guys, not the greatest highlight tape in the world, but all in all, somewhat of a solid player. Pretty good footwork. Plays a little bit high, so needs to improve his pad level. That's going to come with time with Bill Beanbow. And guys, Heath is looks like Oklahoma's 8th commitment thus far in the 2023 class and the 2nd offensive lineman in the class so far. And according to 247 Sports, he is the number 45 overall offensive tackle in the country and the number 8 player from the state of Washington. So, Corbin, are you excited about this? Or you see the 3-star, you see the red hair, and just like, it is what it is?
Somewhere in the middle, I think. The guy did have offers from Stanford and Utah, 2 programs that tend to have some decent O-linemen. But if those are your best offers, let's be honest, guys. This is a last-minute offer. Guy accepts when you just fill a spot. That is what this is. Now, OU's good enough where those last-minute offers can be 3 stars and not, some 2-star, 1-star unranked guy. I don't know, 80% of the programs out there would probably have to resort to at this point. But yeah, guys, I think the entire fan base is sick of the 3 stars. We need something to be excited about. Unfortunately, nothing against this kid personally, but he's probably not getting anybody excited at the moment. So question marks loom, not only with Venable's recruiting approach, but over the past few years with Beanbow's recruiting track record. And so there's certainly some things that seem like they need to be addressed. Now you go out there and you get the Caden Green kid. Maybe things start to change. But now Missouri's, quote unquote, making a run, making things interesting. If you lose him after apparently leading, for all of this time, then yeah, it feels like we're kind of walking on eggshells a little bit, where things are kind of just ready to break.
It won't be the first time that's happened. I don't need to mention names because that could draw some nightmares. But yeah, if you look at the overall class, can you guys name off the top of your head our 2nd ranked recruit right now? Behind Jackson Arnold, who's obviously number 1.
It's the receiver. It's the receiver from Florida, isn't it? Ebron or whatever his name.
Yeah. So technically, I guess if you're looking at the rivals rankings, yeah, he's technically tied. He's a 3-star, 5.7. if you sort by rating, Eric McCarty actually comes up first or second on the list. 3 stars, 5.7. A guy that I think OU fans are excited about. He's an Oklahoma kid. It's much easier to get excited about a 3-star Oklahoma kid than anybody else. But
when the 4 stars leave,
yeah,
it does make sense. Cole Adams, got crystal ball to Alabama earlier today. By the way,
now there was some good news. I think that today, By Job has OU in his top 3. No Vanderbilt there. Ironically, Vanderbilt was the one that I was probably the most worried about because he's got a very big academic focus. But yeah, Bama's there. Michigan State's there. I think Michigan State's playing the NIL game pretty well. They've got some very wealthy alumni that I think want to see that program do well. So there's some encouraging news out there, but it's not a commitment still.
Well, I think that NIL and the way that the landscape of college football recruiting, the way that it's changed, I think that that's kind of magnified or kind of made it a lot more severe in terms of the fan reaction from this OU fan base was seeing, not the lack of the number of commitments as we sit here on June 28th. Now, I'm not quite ready I'm not pushing the panic button by any means. I mean, we'll see what happens over the next couple of months. Brent Venables hasn't even coached his first game yet. Like, let's kind of pump the brakes a little bit. We've kind of talked about it for a while now. 2024 kind of feels like that's going to be the first true, real sign. Like, okay, this is what BV and the rest of this coaching staff can do on the recruiting trail. But guys, I also think too, what makes it so much more difficult as Oklahoma fans for us to kind of, process and swallow what we're seeing here is when you see teams like Texas the week that they've just had, Texas A&M, the last 12 to 18 months that they've had, teams right down the road from us, teams that are either in our conference or about to be in the same conference with us, seeing them, what they've done collectively the last couple of, 12 to 18 months has just been crazy. And kind of to put a bow when talking about this new offensive lineman commitment, it kind of feels like we're seeing a pattern with Bill Beanbo over the last 2 to 3 years where a lot of the kids that come on campus, if they're not from the transfer portal, they're a project case. And I think that that's going to be the biggest difference once you go into the SEC and you start taking on these powerhouses like in Alabama and in Georgia. You can't have to me, it kind of feels like we're recruiting a lot of kids that are project. It's going to take 2 to 3 years for them to be able to get up to speed, be able to play at the level of physicality and speed that's required at this Division I Power 5 level. Whereas you look at places like Alabama, Georgia, and I'm even throwing Texas A&M after what they just did, there is no project for a lot of those kids. They are year one ready to go. As soon as they hit the ground running, they move in on campus. So Oklahoma, if they want to compete in the SEC, especially in the trenches on both sides of the football, you've got to start landing those 4 and 5 star guys that can come in and make an impact in year one. And that's something that Oklahoma fans, we've struggled with the last couple of seasons, regardless of what, Alex Grinch did or Calvin Thibodeau or Bill Beanbo's doing. We're still struggling, and it kind of feels like we're behind the 8 ball compared to some of the other programs in the area.
Can I provide some hope here? Some little bit of optimism.
No, Adam.
As I say, I'm not pressing the panic button. I go on a 2-minute rant about that.
I think I'm pretty high on the panic scale. We'll maybe give that a rating here in a second. So don't take this as me being just, everything's great. But if I look at some just perspective here, OU's ranked number 41 in the team rankings right now. That's going to change dramatically. OU's not going to finish there. Texas A&M, number 40. That's interesting. Michigan, number 46. LSU, with a brand new coach that they seem to be excited about and a much fertile recruiting ground, number 47. So it's not just OU that's in this position. I also went and took a look at what Clemson had done in previous seasons. I specifically went to the 2014 class that had 5-star Deshaun Watson on it, a guy that was thought a lot more highly of at that point. But if you look at that class, that's the foundation of the team that won the national championship, that first national championship for Clemson. And not only did they have several 3-stars on that recruiting class, they had several 2-stars on there, and they continued to have several 2-stars in their recruiting classes for a couple of years. So Clemson, from a blue chip ratio perspective, which I think is a very important figure that measures, can a team win a national championship? It's basically a flaw-proof statistic out there. How many 4 and 5 stars guys do you have on your team? Clemson was doing it probably on a little bit low end of that blue chip scale, around 66% of their roster being 4 and 5 stars. But that's about where OU is. They're probably a little bit higher than that right now. So the talent's there. It doesn't have to be all 4 and 5 stars, but man, you'd like to have more balance. Especially
the good news
here.
is go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, no, just especially here as like we start getting into the season, like we need to have some guys lined up.
The good news is there are plenty of big names out there that are still available. But how long do you give this, guys? If we're not in a better spot by end of July, like where's your panic meter go there? If we start heading into basically fall ball and not much has changed, maybe we add 1 or 2 more guys that actually have some status. But if not much has changed by the time July is done, how are we viewing this?
Well, we read it earlier today on the Crimson Corner with, the Josh chat. He had September 1 as kind of his day in which, you can kind of that's the day where you either go one way or the other.
Yep.
I think it's a lot sooner than that. I think if you're done with the month of July and you still don't have, maybe 2 or 3 more big names like a Caden Green or a Derek LeBlanc, something where you can basically show your fan base as well as show your team, like, okay, we're actually making them ground here, and we're actually able to close on some of these guys. I'm not pressing the panic button, but once you see what A&M's doing and once you see what Texas is doing and what we all know that A&M and Texas are doing from an NIL standpoint, and Oklahoma, for whatever reason, is choosing to get lapped for refusing to play ball, refusing to come to the table. I don't necessarily know what's going on, but we've talked about it for months and months now. If Oklahoma's not going to adapt, if they're not going to, try to have a seat at the table and fork up some cash, you're going to get lapped. And I think that that's what's happening right now. And we'll talk about it here in a second with Texas, but I mean, Oklahoma has been the most dominant program in this region, in this area, for the better part of the last 20 years. Texas goes 5-7 last year. They've had 4 different head coaches in the last 10 years, and they are kicking OU's ass in terms of gathering talent year in and year out.
What else is new, though?
Yeah, that's not news, really.
I think that kind of proves the point that I want to make is that, just like what you were talking about, Adam, with, our fan base, kind of hanging our hat on tradition and stuff. What is prioritized from a recruit right now? And, we're not big recruiting guys. We barely dip our toe in it. But what is a priority right now? It's no longer about tradition. It's no longer about where can I go and win a conference championship. That's kind of on the back burner. There's a lot of other factors that are in play right now in terms of getting these kids to actually sign and come play at your program. And OU is struggling right now to keep up in the arms race of college football as it relates to NIL.
Yeah, it's NIL, and it's who can put me in the league. And unfortunately, the entire especially on the defensive side of the ball, the entire coaching staff has put people in the league, but they haven't done it at Oklahoma. And I still think that matters. Like, you can have skin on the wall, but if you haven't done it when the place you're at, I still think that matters. And so, even on the offensive side of the ball, everybody had tied it to Lincoln Riley. They didn't tie it to DeMarco Murray or Cale Gundy or anybody like that. So, yeah.
And I guess what I want to ask you guys, and again, I'm going to pose this question. I've got a couple A&M guys and a couple more SEC guys that we're going to have an interview with here a little bit later this summer. But Texas A&M, they've got what, 10-win season in the last decade.
COVID year.
Texas, the COVID year. There you go. Texas 5-7 last year, didn't have a single player drafted in the NFL this past season. Yet they go out there and they sign a top 5 recruiting class, and it looks like they're well on their way to another top 5, maybe a top 3 recruiting class. So, what does OU do? I guess is my question. Maybe that's something that we need to ask, a future guest that comes on this podcast, because at this point right now, I don't know, other than forking out just a shitload of cash, what Oklahoma can do to keep up with the 5 or 10 programs. OU's just simply not doing it.
Well, I hate to say that, because I think there are more elements than just the money, but let's face it, this is a new era of college football, and the tables have somewhat even, but there's also the programs out there that have been paying a lot of money under the table and are experts at that, and now it's become above board, and they can go even further with that and get even more people involved. And maybe it's A&M, maybe it's Texas, maybe it's other schools, but they're light years ahead of OU in that regard. And OU's almost still trying to hang on to, we don't have to pay guys, we can hang on, we're just the winning program, and that's never been enough. even before. A&M was never good, and they were still getting guys because winning doesn't always mean that much to every single player. There's tons of guys that want tons of other different things, and that's why A&M had continued to recruit at that level. And I realize that's easier for me to say because, I can only contribute so much to actually get a recruit there, and it's going to take thousands, if not millions, to get some of these guys to come to campus. And I'm always not wanting to spend someone else's money, but like there's going to have to be some bigger guys that want to get in and start buying some of these recruits. Honestly,
the problem with what I think your argument is, Tyler, is like, okay, let's say we go out and we find a way to match a Texas or a Texas A&M on the NIL line. They're just going to beat it. And so at some point, like it's an arms race that we cannot win because we do not have the sizable fan base and we do not have the financial stability of the fan base that those two programs have. And let's be honest, going back to what we discussed before, we do not have the live or die, like this is the only thing that matters, like some of those fan bases do as well. So it's not one we're going to win. And so the thing is, though, if Venables and company can go out and do it on the field, that is the ultimate trump. Do it on the field, put people in the league, then the NIL becomes less important. Like, yeah, you could go make a few $100,000 in your first few years of college, or come here and we can make you millions in a few years. And you won't be worried about the couple $100,000. That's the ultimate trump, and that's what's going to have to be decided on if he can do that or not.
And I think that is a very tough selling point in today's age in 2022 is trying to convince these kids not to accept not to have the instant gratification, accept the NIL money up front, and instead come to a place like Oklahoma where you're going to be developed. We're going to bank on, instead of giving you this money up front just to come play football for us, we're going to prepare you to where you're able to capitalize on that second contract once you get in the NFL and you're able to make that generational wealth type of money. So. And I guess one of the big things that I think has really kind of, sparked this conversation was the commitment. And we can just briefly touch on this because I do want to get your guys' opinions on, has your opinion on Texas changed in the last week or so with the commitment of Arch Manning and the recruiting wave that has come from it, which I think they've gotten 8 commitments in the last 3 to 4 days. Has your opinion on Texas changed at all as we sit here on June 28th?
Turns out I still hate them. So no, my care level is pretty much 0. Like, who knows if Arch Manning even ends up there at the end of the day? And is he any good when he gets there? Like, I don't know. I mean, is Arch Manning really going to be the guy that's going to turn that locker room around and that culture? Like, I don't think so. Who cares really?
I guess my big deal. I mean, one, just starting with Arch Manning. No, I don't think he is as good. I don't think he is the number one recruit in the country right now. I think he's a very good quarterback that plays against terrible competition and is a beneficiary of what his last name is. Now, hopefully, Oklahoma has a chance to beat him a couple times here in the future. But I just lost my train of thought. Corbin, what were you about to say?
I will say I get his last name is Manning. But his dad is the worst football player of all the Mannings. Like, let's chill out for a second here. I mean, he's not Peyton's son. He's not even Eli's son. He's Cooper's son. And
that's a low blow. Cooper had like a medical thing that kept him out.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is he does not.
Going for the throat.
Yeah, it is what it is. But he could turn out to be great. Like, it is highly possible, and so could Jackson Arnold, and so could a lot of the guys around the country. And look at Spencer Rattler, 5-star, unanimous top quarterback. Didn't pan out. And for a multitude of reasons, you can go round and round circles of why that was the case. But just because you have the name, just because you have the NIL, just because you go to a big-time program, does not mean you're going to shift the program where everybody expects you to.